It is the Arban's book. Indeed. In case you're wondering, anybody watching the stream, including my girlfriend, this is my very old, this is probably 1910 library-bound edition of the Arban's book. I guess I can put this on. We won't start the stream for a little while and see if people come. It is an impromptu stream after all. Find a place to put this. But we can still do things. We're using this stream delay to see if the camera will fail, which it has been doing. It did last time, but only once and like halfway through. So it's not going to help us with stuff like that, but it should help us with these things. Now, let's look to see what the copyright year is on this. It's probably pre-copyright, so it's not going to tell us much. Yeah. Yeah, there's no way to tell when this book was actually created. But when it was given to me for Christmas one year, I was told that it was either 10 years on either side of the turn of the century. So either 1890 or 1910. But it's really a beautiful book. Leather here and on the tips here. And otherwise just the normal cardboard, but with that sort of alligator skin texture to it. R.N. Fenton is the name down here, and I'm honestly not sure what that name refers to. So that's probably how we can find out when it was made. I shouldn't use it as much as I do because it's sort of starting to fray, but I just like it so much. This old Arban's book. I suppose I can play some notes. Oh, we're going to start streaming anyway soon, so where's my mouthpiece? There he is. All right, I guess we better start. Let me fix the text portions. All right, so hello, welcome back to the live stream. If you're joining us, we're going to talk about Arban's book stuff today, but not necessarily the stuff that you're used to. You might say, Gabriel, I already know all about the Arban's book. Don't try to tell me anything about it, because I already know everything. And if you are saying that, you're just like I have been most of my life. I said, yeah, Arban's book, great. Give me something interesting. I don't want to play any more Arban's book. Well, why? Because the stuff that we generally, first of all, it's too big to know everything that's in it when you're, I don't know, 11, 12 years old, right? You've only done whatever your teacher showed you, and you assume that there's lots more like that. And if you flip through the book, it pretty much all looks similar, and so you say, yeah, got it. But really, there's a lot in there, and stuff that would help you with all kinds of other things that we just don't really address. So I'll show you a couple of things today, and maybe these are already things that you know about, and so okay, just you can skip those parts, but stay tuned for the rest of it, because there might be some places in the Arban's book that you're not really aware of, or at least not thinking about in the same way that I'm going to talk about them. So the first page we're going to start on, though, is my favorite page, and that is page 44. And we're always going to talk about the old book numbers. There is a new book by Tom Hooton and Jen Murata, husband and wife duo out in California now. And it has different numbers because they've added in more text. It's a very good book, but we always talk old numbers because we refer to page numbers by the majority of the book now. And once we all have the new book, then we can talk about the new page numbers. But it's hard for old people like me to adjust to the new system when we've been saying page 44 for however many years now. Anyway, so okay, Page 44 is number 22 in the legato section of the book, or in other words, known as lip slurs, right? And we're just going to do number 22, and then I'll talk about this section a little bit, and then we'll move on to other sections. And like I say in the description, you might use this book to get better at sight reading. You might use this book to get better at your scales. And it can really be useful for jazz. Very famously, Clifford Brown practiced out of the Arban's book every day. In fact, many jazz trumpet players did. And it's not because necessarily they needed to practice their scales and everything in that same way, although they certainly do. But it is because it was a good fundamentals book as well, and they want to be good trumpet players, right? So, but it really has a lot in there that you can do a lot with. So anyway, let's start playing number 22 on page 44. Here it is. Pretty simple, and it just goes faster and faster. It's a lip slur between two notes. We use G and B, so we could use an altered fingering to get those notes. And it's just duple, triple, right, all the way through. It's quarter notes, eighth notes, triplet, eighth notes, 16th notes, and then sextuplets, so sort of like triplet 16th notes, right? And then you have a long tone at the end, a nice whole note to finish it off. And why is that there? Well, because if you did anything funny during the lip slur portion to get it to happen, you'll notice that your tone is different at the end than you want it to be, right? There's also a big long phrase mark over the whole thing. What's that for? Well, it's there to tell you that you need to do this in one breath. So you can't do it so slowly that you have to take 18 breaths to get through it. You have to do it all in one breath. And also that changes the way you support over time too, right? So let's do a couple more of them. And I like to do them in different speeds. So the slower I go, the more I have to focus to keep my breath solid all the way to the end of my breath, because I'm going to run out of air fast relative to the length, right? And then when I go faster, well, it's a struggle not to just like start to get twitchy at the end of it, where I can't really, I'm not really in control of the sextuplet because it's too fast for me. So we'll go faster and faster and then super slow. And I do this with students who think that they can't do really fast lip slurs, because if you go faster and faster with a metronome, which I have right here, I guess we could do, but I'm going to go faster and wing it. But if you started at 80 and you go 80 and then you do the next one at 100 and then you do the next one at 120 and then 140 and then 160, right? Usually they can get through the triplets all the way up to 160, and then they break down at the 16th notes or whatever. But if you can do the triplets at 160, that means you can do the sextuplets at 180. Or, excuse me, not 180, at 80, right? Because it's half the tempo, and the sextuplets twice the speed as the triplets, right? So it proves to them, yes, you can do at 80 the sextuplets. It's just a matter of understanding how that would sound, right? So anyway, we'll do sort of a mock-up of that. Before I continue, one of my former students says that he was just on his way to play some Arban, and he's doing like an hour of Arban per day. And as your former teacher, I have no right to tell you what to do, but I will remind you that an hour of anything is probably too many of it. So don't overdo it, and you know what I mean. But it is really good to get into the Arban's book, and it's not a bad idea to spend about an hour looking around it. If you have an hour a day for that, then God bless you, just do it. But be careful. Okay, sorry. A little aside. And also thank you for coming to the stream. Welcome back after all these months. So I always find when I come back to the slow tempo, I really have to focus on my support. And my lip slurs are easy. But when I go super fast, sometimes I back off the air a little bit and try to get twitchy, and that's no good. So it's good to vary up the speed. Even if you're an old pro at this, you got to just switch the speed every other one or every couple, or always go up and then back to the beginning or something, right? Just to keep it fresh and make sure that you're really applying the skill you're learning to all the different types of playing you do. Now, if I just go forward in this, there's a little bit of a sort of medium high range study that I always don't find super useful, so I always skip number 23. Now that's sort of a antithetical to the spirit of what we're doing, but one of the things that you'll notice I'll do in the Arban's book is if I think something is easy, I'll go ahead and prove it to myself by doing it, and a lot of times I'm wrong. Well, it's kind of the same thing as like, I don't know if that has a lot of value to me, and so sometimes I won't do it, but it's good to stop and like just do it every month or so to see if it somehow has new added value that you weren't really aware of, because, well, your goals have changed maybe, right? This one, number 23, it's sort of a higher than number 22 goes. Lip slur exercise, even maybe lip trill if you went fast enough. But it's just like this. It goes. I can't even count the number once I do one. Da, 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 da. Yeah, I did too many of that. But it's just like sort of near high lip slurs, and then it doesn't follow that up with actual high range stuff. And I do a whole high range exercise that everybody who watches this stream is more than familiar with, and so I have something to supplant that, and so I don't do this one. But anyway, we're not going to do all of them, but the next two are basically trying to get your tonguing and your slurring together. So we can do one of those. And so far, I lost my place in there. And then the next one is actually really important. This one is a grace note into an eighth note. So you do dayum, 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 dayum. And I find it best to think about it on the beat most of the time, but sometimes it's better to go dayum, dayum, dayum. Whichever one tricks your body into being able to do this really twitchy one-time lip slur, right? And it's basically, there's a really cool trick going on here. I've been teaching, I did this on stream a couple of weeks ago, that when you're having trouble with lip slurs like this, you want to try to, one of the ways to get out of that is to bend one note down until you get to the cusp between the slots of the other note, right? And then try to just hang out on the tip of that cusp, on the sort of peak between the two, and when you fall off towards the bottom, try not to fall off so hard that it's hard to get back off. Well, what this tricks you into doing is to make that top of the bottom slot a lot softer so that you can skip out of it and go right back to it instantly. So it's really tricking you into some tongue position, embouchure posture stuff that you might not otherwise do. You can also kind of tongue your way through it, and hey, you know, if it works, I guess. But I'll do some of that. Right, you can see the idea there. And if you're having trouble with lip slurs in general, that's a great way to sort of throw a wrench in it and try to find a new, better way to do it. And then once you know you can do it that way, then you can try to do that at a slower speed, right? So that you're controlling it. That's a little bit of kind of like, you know, throwing spaghetti at the wall kind of situation. You just have to try to find anything that might work. But then once you know what spaghetti sticks, then that's the spaghetti that you want to cook with all the time, right? Actually, spaghetti against the wall, I believe, is a way to find out that it's al dente. It's like, it's done, it's time to take it out, but I'm not sure about that. Anyway. All right, but number 27 is the one I really want to get to. This is kind of like Clark Terry lick, and again, going towards like how do we use this for jazz or other things, right? Yeah, there's a lot in here that really could be very useful. And one of them is this exercise. This is also a great exercise just if you feel like your flexibility is good but not great. This will really, put you in your place and try to make you learn how to do this like very controlled, very fast kind of lip slur. So I'll do a couple of these. I also add like a triple-tongued double octave thing at the end just because I like to challenge myself in that way, and just doing another low C doesn't seem to be as exciting. So if you're following along at home, I replaced the whole last bar with triple-tongued octaves. At least we got one good triple tongue scale or triple tongue arpeggio in there. The other ones weren't very clean, but that's kind of the point, is that I don't want to have to force things to be clean. I want to do them through coordination. And so if my coordination is getting there because of the exercise, then I want to test it at the end. And obviously it wasn't good enough a couple of those times, but by the end I'm starting to get it. So this whole section is filled with stuff like this. But I'm actually not starting here because I want to do the lip slurs. It's just my favorite place in the book that I use an awful lot. If you ask any of my students, they're all tired of page 44, and for good reason. But if you turn the page one more time to page 48, all of a sudden you get some sort of scale in thirds action. And it's like, wait, this isn't the scale section. Yeah, I know, that's the point, right? I bet you didn't know this existed, because why would you? It's not the lip slurs part, right? But remember, it studies on legato. So in other words, slurring, right? For us, legato for other instruments isn't a slur. It's what we call a slur shape, right? Is just legato to everybody else. And that means different things to different instruments. Obviously for trombone, it could be a slur, but a lot of times they don't have a slur for that, and so then they have to legato tongue. But if you get away from brass even, right? Think about string instruments. What does legato mean to them? Well, it usually means all in one bow as much as possible, right? So that the notes all come out completely as part of one another as they can. But legato technically, in Italian, legato means bound together. So if you think about something bound very tightly to something else, they're basically one thing, right? They're inseparable, and there's no space between them whatsoever. In fact, there's so little space that they're changed by the fact that they are put together so closely. And so that's what we want here. And or rather, that's what this section is addressing. We're just going to use it for whatever we want, right? And that is still the goal of the section. But he gives you, in this case, different ways to play the different exercises, and some of them are less legato. In fact, I guess all of them are less legato. But we're using it for the shape. So let's just play one and we'll see. Now, I bet you've heard those shapes before in all kinds of music, but never really had a specific exercise to practice. And it comes up in all kinds of romantic and post-romantic music because it's a nice melodic kind of way to do scalar material that's not just up and down a scale, right? That's boring. And composers get the idea of this right away. They're like, well, I don't want to just play scales. I don't want this tenor to sing a scale. That's boring. But da 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 as they're singing lyrics to something, absolutely. So you get that a bunch on this page, slightly different versions of that. Then if you look on the next page, we get a 16th note version of something similar that looks a lot like the Clark book. Hit that D too hard and it almost pulled my trumpet off. But so I think that's very interesting myself, right? That's like a Clark-y kind of scale that's in the Arban's book that I never knew about. And it kind of goes on like this for a while. We get some duple versions and triplets, right? I'll play some of those. I'll play a different key. Boy, I can't do it. I need to work on that one, obviously. I can't see this page very well because the book curves, so it's not a good excuse, but I keep thinking, oh yeah, I got it, and then I'm like, wait, what's next? Never play trumpet like that. That's my advice on that. But yeah, you can see, you can start to hear like, okay, yeah, if I was playing in a jazz context, right? What would I be playing? Well, let's think about it. I'll just because I can think of Autumn Leaves without really looking at the music too much. We'll try Autumn Leaves, right? So if I'll just play a little bit of the melody and then I'll just kind of improvise around it, and we'll see what kinds of things come up. Almost lost it there at the end. I didn't know I was going to do two choruses, but I had more things to play. So now I tried to play somewhat common licks that I know from other solos, a lot of my dad's solos, to be honest. Not necessarily on those tunes, but just things that I knew the sound of. And what kinds of things did I play? Well, I didn't play anything that was not an arpeggio or a scale or both of them at the same time, right? So for instance, oh, I'm frozen. It happened. What a time. What a time to be alive. Or in this case, not exactly alive on the camera. Hopefully it'll stick. It only did it one time last time, so we'll just keep an eye on it now. But anyway, what did I play? Okay, well, that's just 3 notes of a major scale, and then at the end, 3 notes of a minor scale, and just down a half step each time, right? So if I know all my major and minor scales, no problem. I just have to be able to hear that and adjust quickly enough, right? What about... That's two notes of an arpeggio, right? I'm doing the G and the E of a C major arpeggio, right? So the, like, sort of a second inversion, if you want to think about it that way. And then I'm just doing that down a half step again until the note that I get is the third and the tonic of where I started. So again, this is all stuff that's in the Arban's book. And everything else I played was either modal scales. And so let's get to that. I mean, it's all about what am I going to do with this information, right? Well, I need to be able to play sounds that I can hear, and the Arban's book is just going to give me more and more sounds that my fingers know how to play, right? So if we get to the end of this section, right, I'll prove my point. And I'm frozen again, I know. We have to solve this issue eventually, but until then, this is the solution. So right, how is this not helping me play exactly the kind of solo that I just played on Autumn Leaves, right? Now, it also has a lot of other things that it can help us with. For instance, etudes that are tonal, especially in a sort of Baroque or classical style, are all going to be made out of these same things. And here we are at the precipice of the scale studies. And so, okay, you might say, Gabriel, I already know all my major scales. Don't bother me with this stuff. Okay, do you know them all in all the diatonic modes? So in other words, do you know C major, and then C major starting on D, and C major starting on E? This is D Dorian, E Phrygian, right? C major starting on F is F Lydian, G Mixolydian, A Aeolian or natural minor, and B Locrian. It actually doesn't make you do B Locrian, but at least not in the first one. But can I do that? Well, let's find out as I reset this one more time. I guess there's no rhyme or reason to it. One day I'll figure out what the story is, but until that day, sorry. I don't know what makes it do this, so I'm not going to try to understand. But you can understand from just what you can hear that this is going to help you in a jazz context, because very rarely is a jazz tune in more than a couple of keys at a time, or rather next to each other, right? And they're up until then they're going to be in a diatonic modal setting, right? So if I have 2-5-1 in the key of C, that's going to be all in the key of C, but just different chords in the key of C. And so that's what the major scales section is going to get us. Now, we don't have to stay there. We can keep going, right? But every major scale is written out at least some of the way in that kind of context, in other contexts as well. Then we get the minor scales. And so, of course, that's going to help us in the same way. And then we get the chromatic scales, which arguably maybe are the first scales that people should learn, but, you know. Chromatic triplets. Well, here's another one. Let's try this one. Oh, I'm sorry. That was all. You couldn't hear any of that, but do your best. right? This is all going to be helpful stuff. What I was saying earlier is that you've got your major scales, you got your minor scales, they're all in there, and they're all the diatonic things. So if you have 2-5-1 in a jazz tune, it's all going to be in that one key. And then the next, of course, as soon as I turn on my mic, that can't be what does it, because it's not connected to the computer in that way. But anyway, these diatonic scales are going to help you in this way, and they're all in the Arban's book, as well as the minor scales and all the diatonic modes for each of those scales as well. So that's the way you want. And then this is a chromatic triplet section, right? And then if you just keep going, you've got the gruppetto, which is like sort of the turn, right? And this is, again, more interesting stuff to practice that you might think, oh, I already know how to do that. Well, let's see. And is it going to help you? Well, yeah, for sure. In Bach, in violin music, in Baroque music, we're going to get a lot of things that are sort of like this, even if it's not an actual turn. So we'll try it out. That's the rest of that exercise. Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a lot of music I know. And so, and it also might be a sound that I want to use. And there's just 1,000 of these things. I mean, not literally, but it just goes on, different. And if you think you can do one, you just go ahead and prove it to yourself. I bet you can't. I bet you have a lot of work to do on it before you can get it exactly right. And then he does all the appoggiaturas. I mean, these are all the basic components of music, not just classical music, but jazz music as well. Now, if you were looking through this book and thinking like, hey, yeah, you mentioned the Clark book earlier, Gabriel. What is there any more like that where it's like, I would only need this, but I don't even really need a bunch of other books? Well, yeah, that was Clark number 2 that we talked about, right? The scale in sort of skip one, come back, skip one, come back, right? That Clark number 2 shape of exercise. Well, how about Clark number 4? I think it's number 4. I wasn't ready for that at the end there. Yeah, that's a lot like Clark number 4. Now it's not trying to accomplish the same goal as Clark number 4, but it is sort of a trill tones exercise, and there's more to it than this. And this is trying to get us to do the gruppetto, so that we can have really nice, easy sort of trills and finishers to our trills. So not the gruppetto, but the trill. And you keep going, and there's just so much more. So much more. But okay, then you might try intervals. Well, intervals are scales that go back to the same note over and over again, right? You just keep going, and eventually you get to the arpeggios. Now, arpeggios are obviously something that we want to work on in a jazz context because we need to know what those notes are, but they're also everything in classical music too, right? So again, this is just like who is harmed by trying to do these. So these are the major and minor chords, and I'll just give you a small example. So about every other one goes up, spans 2 octaves, and then the other ones do the first pattern. And there's a third pattern that goes down and then an octave at the end. But anyway, different patterns of all the major and minor chords all the way through. Who doesn't need to know that? And then all their inversions as well, right? That's what we're doing. And then you get the dominant seventh. Well, speaking of jazz, right, you definitely need to know this one. So we'll do a couple of those. What am I doing? So you can see this is a lot of different versions of the same thing, and you might get bored with it, but it's there for you. And when you crash and burn on your solos or your jazz improv or whatever it is that you're working on, you're going to wish that you'd practiced out of this section of the book a lot more. And so it doesn't take very long to do. Just a couple of minutes a day. And this is just the section that we're in right now. We said, what about sight reading? Well, all these things are going to help us do sight reading. Of course, everybody knows the double and triple tonguing sections of the book. We're not going to go over that because that's generally what people actually use the book for. But still a good section for you to look at. But okay, what about sight reading? Well, let's say I'm not a very good sight reader, which I could probably say about myself at this point. I haven't been practicing it. But I want to practice it, right? Well, all the things we've done so far, different rhythms, different patterns of notes, that's all going to help us sight read better, right? Because I'm familiar with things. But what if I just want to test out my skills of an artist, as they say, right? Well, okay, let's try to do that. And we'll just turn to the art of phrasing section of the book, which has nice, simple melodies, right? So I'm going to play Woodman Spare That Tree. On page 195, it's number 16. Sorry, I got distracted by how my stream froze immediately when I tried to play. I don't know what's going on. We'll probably have to cut it short here, but that is, well, now the computer is quieter, so I bet it's fine now. We'll see. But okay, so I messed some things up. I wasn't really prepared to play. I didn't look ahead enough to see the shape of the grace notes that came before the fourth beat of the fourth to last measure. And I wasn't physically prepared for the octave leap in one spot, but that helps us. I had something to read that I've never read before. I can't say that I probably haven't read this before at some point, but I don't remember it. And there's a bunch of these, right? I don't know how many, but they get progressively harder, generally speaking, not necessarily to sight read, but they get harder in terms of their length and their range and their rhythmic complexity. So that generally means harder to sight read. I guess depends on if you're, the keys don't get necessarily harder throughout, but they eventually get harder. So that's where you can go for all that. So and then of course there's the solos in the back. Again, another place we all use. And the beginning, the first studies, which is also something that a lot of people use really well. If you don't use first studies, it's a great place to practice new things. So like new articulation method, a new trumpet that you just bought, a new mouthpiece that you're not really sure if you like or not, right? That's the kind of thing that First Studies is really great at, as well as just how easy can you make the trumpet, So that's all we're going to do with the Arban's book. But now, and we've already done some jazz stuff, and I've sort of demonstrated why the Arban's book would be good for that. Now I want to show you a little bit of this etude that has a lot of that stuff in it. This is a etude from a string etude book. We borrow it from the Aaron Harris book. It's etude number 32. I've done this on stream before, but I haven't looked at it in a long time. But if we practice the Arban's book in all these different arpeggios, intervals, scales, the appoggiatura section, the trill section, all of that, right? Then, yeah, I'm going to get tired of this for eventually. But then we should be able to play these with relative ease, given our physical ability. So let's try a little bit of this, number 32 from the Harris book, and I'm sure it'll freeze on me immediately. So sorry. Got lucky. So you can hear it's just major and minor arpeggios and scales. That's all this is. And if I'm really familiar with it, I had to double check my key signature. I wasn't ready for that. And so I hesitated, and that's when I started to fall apart. So if you don't have to hesitate because the shapes are all familiar to you and the sound, then you're always going to do pretty well at even the hardest etudes. This is a very hard etude, but it's doable through knowing all those things. And the Arban's book is literally putting them in front of you, right? So now I didn't talk about how to find these things in the Arban's book, besides just listening to a video and checking them out. What I'll often do is I'll just take the Arban's book. I'll get it back out because premature putting away, and I'll just flip it like this. Like you can sort of see barely, and I'll just open it to a page, and I'll go, oh. Okay, this is page 110, Vom Portamento. And I'll just say, yeah, this seems not too hard to me. Okay, well then prove it. I'll prove it to myself, right? Let's just see. So yeah, I don't think that I'm really running into anything impossible here. My endurance is a little bit rough because I played a lot already today, but I don't see anything in that one that's going to be really bad. I guess I should have said the portamento. Vom portamento is the other language, and do portamento is the third language. But all right. Now I could look at the next one. I could look at the next one. They all look pretty similar to me, but this one goes down, and so I'm going to try that one because it looks different, and maybe there's going to be an error there. So if anything, this one is a little bit easier, but I'm really focusing on making it portamento. If you don't know, portamento means sort of drawn. It's sometimes even glissandi, but portamento, like I don't know how to describe it better than I've just done. But okay, and here it's clearly grace notes for us, right? Slurred grace notes. So all right, I'm not worried about that. Then there's down here that says the trill or shake. And yeah, I might want to practice that, but I know how to do most trills. So if I'm not sure, then I'm going to work on that. As a matter of fact, we did already number 61 on page 112 earlier, right? That's the one that we said looks like the Clark number 4. So, okay, so that section didn't do anything new for me, so I'm just going to not look. And okay, here's some tucka-tuckas, double tongue, right? I keep checking the stream if you wonder why I look. I don't want to jinx it, so I'm not going to talk about it. But this is in the middle of the double tonguing section, so I'm not instantly sure that I can do it, but it looks pretty easy. So I'm going to just, again, prove it to myself. If I play a couple of them and I'm like, no, that's too easy for Gabriel, well, then I can turn the page one way or another and see if I can find something harder, or I can just flip it again, right? So this is how I found a lot of these sections in the Arban's book, where I just was like, yeah, do I really need to work on my double tonguing? And then I would work on the beginning of the double tonguing section, and it would go really well, and then I'd start to get tired, and I'd close the book and I'd go home. Well, I never got to the hard sections, and yeah, of course my double tonguing needed work, but I never really worked on it because I always did the easy version and not the hard version. So if you just flip around in there a little bit, you'll find stuff you can't do. And if you just do one on the page, and if it's too easy, then the whole page might be too easy. So you either look for something that looks different, or you just turn the page, or you just flip to a new section if you don't really need that thing. So anyway, I always need double tongue. So let's work on, this is page 184, number 119. So I went two different speeds because I generally do my double tongue very slowly, as slow as I could single tongue first, and then I go faster than I could single tongue to work on my fast double tongue. So I guess I can work on just fast double tongue for the rest of this. But that one didn't seem too hard. So now I'm going to skip one because it looks the same as the one I just did almost, and I'm going to do one where the notes constantly move. Oh, a trick ending that I didn't like. But okay, and some of that wasn't perfect. It wasn't really clean. Again, I would probably go slower to clean it up. But okay, I can work on more of these. The next one is, it goes up higher and it has a slightly different pattern that doesn't ever stop. I guess it's the same pattern that doesn't stop. So as loath as I am to do it, I'm going to try it. I mean, imagine if you did that in every key once a week, right? Your double tongue would be killer, your scales would be killer, your finger and your tongue together would be killer, your air would be superior. I mean, everything would be amazing. So this is what I'm saying is like, yeah, maybe we should work on that stuff. Now this one, the next one goes takataya, 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 right? It's a reverse of what we just did, and that might be challenging. I'm going to skip one just for the memes and lulz, right? I'm just going to go to 124 where the slur is even a bigger slur, but I'm going to slow it down just slightly. So tricky, but not impossible. And you can work on it. Like I said, I started slow and then got faster to where I felt comfortable. So you can use the exercises however you want, but don't just ignore them. Don't not know they're there, right? So this is how I kind of use the Arban's book, and I just kind of fly along and see what's up with different pages and see if I can play those pages. And if I think I can, I prove it. And if I am wrong, I work on it. And if I'm right, then I find another page. So there's the Arban's book. We've done this a couple of times, and I'm sorry for all the hiccups in the stream, but it seems to have resolved itself. So I'm going to work a little bit on this C to D ascending valve trumpet etude that I'm working on writing. I told my students about this, and so let me explain the trumpet first while we still have video. First, let's get a mouthpiece in it. Okay, so what is this? Well, if you look here, there's a contraption, a valve. You can see it, right? Put it close to me, yes. You can see there's a valve, right? And normally, if you look on this side, normally when the valve is open, the lead pipe, air comes along the lead pipe, goes into this squirrely little valve here, and then back through the rest of the lead pipe and into the horn. But when you push this thumb valve down, right, it reroutes the air so that it goes directly through the pipe and into the other pipe. You can't really see that there, but you can't really tell what it's doing anyway, right? So what that means is this is a C trumpet without the valve down. So right, C trumpet, and then when I push the valve down, which I'll play off to the side so you can see my finger doing it, and then you'll just have to imagine it the rest of the time, then it brings it up a step. So watch. Well, you can't see it anyway. Right, so it's a C trumpet when it's not depressed, and when you do push the valve, it's a D trumpet. And so why would you want to do that? Well, there's a whole history of it. I won't go into now because I always forget all the names and the years. But basically, in the French Conservatory, there were two schools of thought at one time, and one was that the deep tone trumpet, which was very long, was the right sound and the way we wanted to play in orchestras and otherwise. And then the C-D trumpet was a solution to how many notes you miss when you play a very long trumpet like that. This is a short trumpet, and but it would be out of tune to make a C trumpet back then. And so the ascending C-D valve is an attempt to put two keys. You could make it like a half step, for instance, right? And then you'd have a C-D flat trumpet. And then you could basically only ever play in the keys of G and F and whatever on both trumpets. But because you don't generally play in the key of F sharp major, let's say, then you don't really need that one. So how about let's never need to play in the key of A because we can play in the key of G plus D trumpet, right? And so it's kind of a way to get around having to use the third valve too much. But when you do use it, that you can put it right in tune. And that's the only valve on this instrument that actually moves, so you can't move the first valve. So you have to get this whole thing kind of situated. And the etude that I'm writing a little bit is in order to force me to learn how to use this valve on the fly, so that if I wanted to read music, you know, like we were playing before, I could just, like, I would have two fingerings basically for every note, and I would decide which one was the best on the fly that also made it possible for me to play it. And I don't know if I'll ever get there, but I'll never get there if I don't try it. And so I'm writing this little etude of my own to try to force me to learn those things in a little gentler manner. So I'll play some of it and I'll sort of show you. And you'll notice when I push the valve down, because my fingers won't go down, right? So yeah, I'll show you what the etude roughly sounds like so far. So there I want to modulate into a really bad key to have to shift into D mode so that I'm playing in the key of B major instead of D flat major, which is a little slightly better. And it's actually pretty in tune as long as I stick to the main B major triad type stuff, right? But you can see this is a very challenging trumpet mentally, because there's a couple of ways I could do things. Like, for instance, I can play this whole etude without touching the D trumpet. Right, but that's not really interesting, and it's not really teaching me anything. It helps me play the trumpet better, but I'm not after, I could play my normal C trumpet for that. I'm after using this D valve more, and then learning different ways to do it. So what I'll do is I'll write this whole etude out, and then I'll write the different fingerings, and then I'll have to do them both. So I'll give you an example. So there's an interesting one where I can play down a half step by playing the D side. So in other words, I'm playing an F on the C trumpet, right? And then I want to go down to an E concert, and I play the D trumpet, which should go up, right? But it's a D on D trumpet, which is an E on C trumpet, which is down a half step from the F that I'm playing. So it actually sort of throws a wrench in the partial that you're playing, because you can play around with the partial and the fingering and now the trumpet, right? So now that's what makes it really crazy. So I can do that in that case. I can play a half step with a whole step change, which doesn't seem to make any sense, but it does when you think about it. And that's what I want to try to do with this instrument. So anyway, as much trouble as we had on stream, I'm not going to push my luck. And this was an impromptu one that already lasted an hour, half of which was probably me turning on and off the camera app. But so I apologize for that, but I hope you still stayed around and learned something about the Arban's book, about what it can do. And now you know about this cool Thibaut Villemay CD ascending valve trumpet. And if you want to write me an etude, I promise to play it. So until next time, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Oh, that was a bad ending. But you've come to expect no less from me. Okay, this time for real. See you next time.